Today, though, we are talking about networking for novices. What I want to do is provide a sort of a checklist to get you started. And the reason that I sort of frame this as networking for novices is because it's not a skill that always comes naturally to everyone. So sometimes I think people can assume that once you figure out that networking is important, which it is, that you can immediately run off and it sort of makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes people get thrown into this idea that networking is important, but feel a little bit uncertain about whether they're doing it right, whether they are approaching it in a strategic way, whether they're doing everything in the right order. And so I wanted to sort of take a step back from the concept of networking and sort of make sure that everyone feels confident that they have a solid foundation for doing networking that's going to be helpful to you. So I'm Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn's Career Services. So let's think about networking as a concept. If you come to a career services appointment with an advisor, we will certainly talk about networking. We will certainly advise that it's something that you do, that you integrate as part of your career and professional development. But that doesn't mean that it's going to feel easy to everyone in the same way. I think some people look forward to it because it's an opportunity to engage with people, and some people are more hesitant because engaging with people is not something that necessarily brings a lot of energy. And so I think a lot of people look at networking and say, I know it exists as a concept, I know that I should be doing it, but I'm not really 100% sure what I should be doing or how I should be doing it. And it's never something that feels entirely exciting necessarily as you think about it. Now we are edging towards, and I don't want to sort of jinx anything, edging towards the end of this pandemic where networking may begin once again to look something like this, right? This is always a stock image I use when thinking about networking before the pandemic. And to be honest, it's just as stressful looking at it now, just with, a slightly different version of the stress. But to me, someone with introverted tendencies, this does not look like something that is easy to manage, that I know what I'd be doing here that would bring me joy, right? Lots of people talking, lots of things going on. Something that I think would not necessarily feel like it would be productive in terms of connecting with people or finding information to questions I have. So for me, that's what I see here. For those of you with more extroverted tendencies, you might see this as a wonderful opportunity to get to know lots of people. So there's no one perspective about how networking works or how you feel about it that is better or worse. These are just the realities of what the world is around us. Now, beyond the in-person version of networking, we still live in our virtual space, and that will continue on, regardless of what's going on in the world. So the virtual environment is full of people, full of connections that we can make with different people out there. These are all Penn alumni, on LinkedIn, and they're all, there's many of them. And how many of them are there? Well, there's 740 million people on LinkedIn, which is super overwhelming in terms of as you think about it. And, if you just get onto LinkedIn and start poodling around and looking at things and you see all of these smiling faces out there, that's overwhelming too, because there's just so many people doing so many different things. And they all seem to have it sorted, from the outside. And you may be looking at it and saying, well, I don't feel like these people. I don't look like these people in terms of where they are professionally. So, these are things to manage. So both the in-person interactions and the virtual interactions that you can have are manageable if you think about what it is that you're trying to achieve as part of your networking. Now, for me, again, with my introverted tendencies, as soon as I get to, more than about 4 people in a group around me, I'm going to feel somewhat uncomfortable in that situation unless I really know what I'm doing there and unless I have a plan, right? So I'm much more comfortable in a one-on-one type interaction with someone. And that's great in terms of how networking works, because a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is really about, finding a person in a moment of time and engaging with them and understanding their journey and their experience and their advice and utilizing that to help you achieve your goals, right? So it's not about big events. It's not about giant things that you have to go to, networking events or career fairs. All of these things are helpful and you can add them in. But most of what we'll be talking about today is sort of engaging, finding the right person to engage with and making sure that that is a meaningful interaction that you're having. So before you sort of take the plunge, as it were, and jump into networking, especially if you're just starting this process now, or even if you have started and you just want to confirm that you're sort of taking the right approach, I'm going to go through sort of, I call them 7 steps here, just to sort of make sure that you feel comfortable doing what it is that you're doing when it comes to networking. The first most critical point of networking is understanding why it is that you actually want to network. right? So yes, people say it's important. Yes, you read about it and articles are saying important, but what is it that you actually want to achieve as part of your networking goal? Because fundamentally, what you need to do with networking is to have a set of questions that you're trying to answer, questions about your career development, about your next step, about how to position yourself effectively for a role. It's these questions that really are the bedrock of networking. Now, your networking goals, obviously in the real world picture, is to get an internship or to get a job. But you can't just find someone out there online or in person and ask them or tell them to give you a job, right? There's sort of steps that you need in the interim. And those interim steps are really questions, things that value the person that you're chatting with so that they feel that they can be helpful to you, so that they feel that their lived experience can be valuable to you, so that they feel good about their lived experience because someone else appreciates that. So your networking questions are going to be unique to your career path and your path moving forward, so that there aren't sort of a standard questions that you need to ask. But as you think about your next steps, eventually, if you sort of think about it long enough, you'll realize what you don't know, right? I don't know which type of organization I want. I don't know the difference between this type of organization or this. I don't know what consulting is. I don't know X and Y, right? So these questions help then guide your networking outreach, because as soon as you have questions, you're then able to say, well, who has answers to those questions? Who can I find out there in my networks that might be able to give me insight so that I can have answers to these questions and use those answers productively as I apply for jobs, as I interview for jobs, as I negotiate for jobs in terms of job offers moving forward. So these are just the types of questions that might be generally meaningful to you or specific to some of you and not to others. But fundamentally, what you want to start with is questions. And once you have questions, it's much easier to find the right people to answer the questions. And when you find the right people who have answered those questions, they're going to be more engaged in chatting with you because they know then that they are valuable to you, that they know that they can give you something that's going to be helpful to your career journey. So, if we think about this from an introverted, extroverted perspective, if I don't know why I'm chatting with someone, it's hard, right? If I know why I'm chatting, if I have a plan, if I have a question I'm trying to get to, I can be much more focused on engaging with that person in conversation, but to get that answer. It's actually really important for extroverts, people who love to chat with people, to have specific questions that they're trying to get answers to, because sometimes people with extroverted tendencies enjoy the conversation so much that they forget that the reason that they're there is to actually get information and useful information that they can apply. So it works. It's important for both people from both of those sides of the coin, as it were, to do this. But questions will ensure that you're always making progress, because once you've had an answer to the question, you can stop networking, you can stop asking that question, you can move on to the next one that you have. The timeline is important too, because networking is something obviously that can happen anytime, but the type of networking or the intensity of networking might be different depending on where you are in this process. So in terms of a timeline, I think if you are right at the beginning of your time at Penn, and everyone in this presentation might have a different timeline, a 1-year program, a 3-year program, a 5-year program. But if you're at the beginning of your time at Penn, much of the networking feels more like just information gathering. You're interested about the world of work, you're interested about what careers tend to look like or feel like in certain areas. And that is something that is very helpful to do early on. What it means is that you can ask there are no silly questions, but you can ask some of the more basic questions early on to people before you're anywhere near actually applying for positions, so that when you do come to applying for positions and when you're connecting with people at that point in time, you're asking much smarter questions because you're using the information that you're gaining from these earlier conversations that you're having. It's much easier to convince someone to have a conversation with you when you don't need anything from them but information, right? So if you reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm on the job market, I'm applying for a position, applying for a role in consulting, I'd love to chat with you. In between the lines of that sort of general statement is a sort of a sense that you need something or want something from them, you want them to help you get the job, and that may make them feel awkward because they may not have any of that power to help you do that, right? And so they may be hesitant to have that conversation with you, knowing that they can't actually help you get the job. But if you're there saying, I'm going to be applying for jobs next year, but I'd love to chat with you right now to gain some information so I know how best to prepare myself for that. Can I ask you a few questions? Doing that early on, I think, is much more disarming in terms of that conversation. You're more likely to get people wanting to chat with you. Now, obviously, even if you are approaching the end of your program, you can still ask those general questions. So there's never a bad time to ask those questions. But if you are applying for roles right now in an organization, you probably don't want to network with people at that organization and ask questions that sound like you don't really know how that organization works or what they do, right? So you sort of do want to separate questions that are information gathering from questions that are more application driven, so that you can distinguish the I don't know what I'm doing to the I know exactly what I'm doing versions of yourself. So the timeline is important because it sort of gives you a sense of who you can be engaging with, right? I really only engage with recruiters once you have a very solid background and understanding of the role, the organization, and the industry that you're interested in. I wouldn't start off, for example, with a recruiter because they don't have time to catch you up on all the things that you could find out for yourself through your online research and through your other networking. Your networks are also going to be important in terms of thinking about who exists in those networks and where to start with those networks, because there are many versions of what those networks can look like for you, right? So putting you in the middle on scooters, seen lots of scooters around Penn. These are different types of groups of networks that exist for you. Your friends and family, and the people that your friends and family know. The people around you in your cohort, right? These people come to Penn from all sorts of different areas. Some have been in the world of work before and then have come back. Some have had internships at places that you haven't. That's a grouping right there. Alumni is a big connection group. Obviously, that's very easy to tap into. There's 173,000 of those on LinkedIn that you can check through. The groups that exist on campus that you can be part of involve people, again, from different academic disciplines with different sort of career interests or similar career interests, but with different experiences that they can share. If you're part of an academic field, you will have a professional and scholarly association that is connected with your field, whether you're an engineer or someone in the humanities. There are always professional associations that exist out there. You can be part of that, and that may be part of your network as well. And then you may have other interests unconnected to your research or your work at Penn or a student group or your career-related things, just things that you care about. Playing musical instruments, dancing, whatever that is. And that will be another group of people who have different experiences that you can leverage. So it's a really great exercise to sort of sit down and take stock of who you actually know and who's in these networks, right? You create a sort of spreadsheet. Who do I know in these networks? Because they are part of the group that you may be able to reach out to and connect with. They may have answers to some of the questions. They also may know people through their networks that they can connect you with, right? So it's not just the people that you know, it's also the people that they know that can be part of your network. Sometimes networking by yourself feels challenging because it can be energy draining for some of us, but it also feels like, well, I've done it, but now what? What do I take away from that? What does that mean? How do I use this, right? And so being able to reflect together on outreach that you have is sometimes really helpful. If you are someone who has sort of hesitancy in reaching out and having conversations, having a buddy or an accountability buddy to keep you on track is great, because it's sort of a reason why you need to have these conversations, right? No one is out there forcing you to have these conversations, but if you have someone that you're doing this with, you can both set yourself a challenge to have a couple of conversations a week and then share your insights with each other. So you're basically doubling up on the number of networking contacts that you have, because you can each share what you learned from your own outreach to different types of people. And you don't have to do it with people who are in your same field or interested in the same role. You can do it with people who have very different roles. The process of sort of debriefing after a networking experience, I think, is a very helpful one. So if you can find someone to do that, I think that's great. At Career Services, you can always schedule an appointment with us and just say, I want to update you on what I've been doing networking from a networking perspective. I had these conversations. This is what I learned, but I don't know what to do with that. What would be my next steps beyond that? So if you want to keep yourself on track with your networking, then feel free to leverage Career Services as one of the ways that you can do that, as a way to sort of keep you on track. We're always happy to be a sounding board and sort of give you a motivational boost when it comes to making sure that you're connecting with people through your networking. Lowest hanging fruit, I think, is a good way of thinking about a good first step, because it can feel challenging. There's lots of people, Penn alumni, who are CEOs of companies that you might want to work with, but that's probably not where you want to go with your networking, right? You want to start with people who are easiest to access, who are most likely to respond to you saying, can I have a chat with you? And who have information that is relevant to you in the here and now, not just relevant. A CEO no longer has information about how to apply for the jobs at their organization, for example. So you want to have easy connections with people around you to sort of take advantage of that. Some of this, lowest hanging fruit is really sort of thinking about ways that you can gather information from people without necessarily having to be totally active in engagement, right? So if you can do sort of what looks like networking without actually having to speak with people, that's a great first step to get you comfortable with this. So sometimes that means reading about people's stories online. Sometimes that means following blogs where they talk about career journeys. Sometimes that means watching videos of people talking about their experience so that you can get a sense of how those conversations feel. So there's a lot of sort of non-active, or perhaps passive is too strong a word, but passive networking experiences that you can take advantage of. Again, in the links I put in the chat, you can get access to all of these things that I'm listing in the presentation. The Aurora platform has been developed for PhD students and postdocs, but there's nothing stopping everyone from signing up and taking a look at their career exploration video library. What this video library represents is a sort of, I think, over 200 interviews, 5 to 15-minute interviews with PhDs in different fields, where you can hear about the stories that they tell about how they got to where they are and what they do in their role right now and what advice that they would give to people. Aurora is great as a platform. We subscribe to it so that you have access to it for free. Is that there's a nice workbook that you can download that actually helps you sort of jot down notes about these videos that you can watch so that you are taking full advantage of those resources. And so the Aurora platform is great. These are just some of the examples of how you can search through their 200 or so videos. You can do it by sort of discipline area. You can also do it by sort of skill set. Now, what they don't sort of give you the option to do is to do a search by job title. And that's sort of purposeful for this population because you don't necessarily know what job title it is that you want moving forward. So the job titles themselves aren't necessarily as valuable as knowing what skills or what attributes are connected with that job. And so that's why you see things like creativity and innovation as things that you can search for. These are topics that came from the discussion, so they are relevant to the role that people have that they talk about. So this is very sort of easy networking because you're not actually having a conversation with these people. Someone else is having that conversation with these people for you, but you still gain the benefit of doing that. And then again, debrief after watching it. So don't just watch it and then get on with the next task on your list. Take some time to process it. Think about the questions that were asked. Think about how the conversation started and ended so that you can use similar approaches as you're thinking about your networking. Think about what you actually took away from it and what you would have asked differently in terms of if you were in that conversation, what would be meaningful to you that wasn't covered? Because again, your questions and someone else's questions are going to be subtly different. As I mentioned, the Aurora platform has these workbooks, and they're really great just to sort of help keep you structured, keep your approach structured when you're thinking about networking, right? So whether you're exploring in general or whether you're taking advantage of those videos, do download some of the Aurora notebooks because they are developed to keep you on track and developed to help you think about and ponder on some of the things that you're learning. Another great low-hanging fruit is actually the students on Handshake, right? So Handshake is our platform that we use to engage with students and employers. It's what our events are, as you got here today. If you go onto Handshake and click on your profile in the top right-hand corner, and then scroll down the next the page that comes up, you'll see that you can come to this Discover More Students page. And these are students across the Handshake network. And Handshake is used by over 500 schools in the US, I think, and many more abroad as well. But you can search through that entire network of students who've made their profiles public, or you can sort of narrow it down to the University of Pennsylvania only, which is what I've done here. So you can see that you can narrow it down by majors, by school years, and potentially do some research into people who may have answers to questions that you have. So if I was interested in master's students who have a major in data science, who had a previous experience with Amazon, then there are 8 people at Penn that I might be able to reach out to. And these people may have previous internship experiences at Amazon. And so if I were applying for an internship role, these people may have answers to some of the questions that I have. And through Handshake, you can then sort of click on one of these people and message them directly. But you can also find their Penn email address pretty easily as well. You may even find that they're in your cohort. But even if you were outside of the School of Engineering, you could find ways to connect with these people through Handshake. So again, students are most likely to say yes to, can you tell me about your experience? Because they're right here with you in the process, but also physically and mentally where you are in this process of looking for opportunities moving forward. So very low hanging fruit that can still be really productive. Make sure that you manage the data that you're collecting, right? So as you're having these conversations, as you're listening to videos, as you're looking at things online, there's going to be lots of stuff that's going to crowd up your head and make it feel overwhelming. So find any avenue that makes sense to you to keep track of what you're doing, right? So this is just an example, Excel spreadsheet, different sheets for different industries, employers, position titles, skills needed, knowledge needed, contacts that I should talk to, advice that they gave, right? So you can create your own system to do this, but this is a really great way of making sure that your brain stays clear and focused, but you don't lose track of any of that information. And so you can see where the gaps are in this sort of spreadsheet, which helps you then say, well, what do I need to do next? I need to fill in some of these gaps that I have here, so I should reach out to someone who has information on this, right? So a very easy way to sort of keep yourself on track with that. CareerShift is one of the tools that we have that we again subscribe to. They have a sort of a way of tracking data there. So if I were to do a job title search that involved the word climate on CareerShift, I could gather together all of the jobs that were out there with people, the contacts whose job titles include the word climate, and that can be a very large list of people. I can narrow it down by a keyword, climate and sustainability, for example, and then I could gather all these people together into a folder on CareerShift so that I could slowly go through and see if I can make connections with that. So I could create a folder on CareerShift called climate roles. I could save that group of people that I found through my keyword searches. And then I could reach out to them, because there's an email there that I can get that CareerShift provides, or I could find, other contacts that I might have to help me start that conversation. And if I am able to have a conversation with Brad, I can actually keep track of what that conversation looked like in my record related to Brad here, right? So I can keep an individual record on CareerShift of what that looks like. Now, this may be overly complicated for you in terms of how you want to manage the data, but again, it's a tool that exists out there that you might be able to take advantage of if you wanted to. And then importantly, making sure that you have your outreach material sorted, right? So you're eventually going to start reaching out to people, and you want to make sure that you have a nice list of ways to start conversations. So what does that email look like? Our informational interviewing guide is a nice overview of how to reach out and have these informational interviews. We do include within this guide sort of a sample email that you can use that sort of demonstrates how you can start a conversation that feels meaningful to the person who's going to be reading it. So why is it that you're reaching out to them? What do you hope to gain from them? What does that look like, right? So this is just one version of an email. It's not the only version that you need to send, but it gives you an example of what that can look like moving forward. On the Aurora platform, again, I talked about sort of the workbooks that they have. So one of their workbooks as part of their Evaluate Your Opportunities has some of these sample emails that you can use when reaching out to contacts, whether they're first degree, second degree, third degree. So do take a look at that as a resource as well. Now, even our big interview platform, which is primarily to give you interview practice and interview advice, has resources on networking and reaching out to people. So they have a video curriculum that you can utilize here that's going to be very helpful for you if you want to sort of see and get advice on doing that. So again, lots of different sources have information on networking that you can leverage as part of this experience. They have a networking context worksheet that you can download, much like my Excel spreadsheet, so you can decide which one of these things that you might want to utilize as you're creating your own database. So that's it. We're sort of right at the end of our time here together. These are the sort of the 7 ones that I talked about. And our last one here, 8, is, check in with an advisor at Career Services when you have the opportunity to do so, when you think that will be helpful. And that will make sure that, you can stay on track with the networking that you're doing, right? So these are just a solid foundation for your networking that hopefully makes it feel less overwhelming, more engaging, more energizing, because even if you are, someone with introverted tendencies, you can gain a lot from this, and it can be energizing when you have a plan and a strategy to make it happen.